the Martinique and Guadeloupe have for many years had the Alliance Française. Many people have gone from here to Martinique and Guadeloupe. There's actually an idea that perhaps that ought to happen even at the CARICOM level, that more Barbadians need to go to Belize, more Belizeans need to come to Barbados or St. Lucia, particularly as the ties between 4 CARICOM member states have deepened tremendously this year. To what extent can there be an equivalent to an Alliance Française with or independently of the support from Venezuela in really getting our young people to learn more about, beyond YouTube videos and influencers, about their neighbors, the people who took the same trip on the same ship?
Well, you know, it is happening. Martinique has just become an associate member of CARICOM. In fact, just last week, Friday, we had a meeting between the team from the Barbados Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the governance structure of the territorial the local government structure of Martinique, putting in place a bilateral cooperation agreement. So there's a recognition that the old world is slipping away, that we cannot simply continue so dependent on these relations with the North Atlantic, that we have to intensify our own regional relationships, so with the French-speaking Caribbean, Martinique, Guadeloupe, with Venezuela, with Latin America, with Cuba, and I wanted to assure Martha that, you know, you spoke, Julius, about the social media and the fact that it is so powerful and it is perhaps so easy to mislead and confuse and distract our people. But I want to say that our people have a deep-rooted, a kind of folk-rooted understanding that is deeper than the mischief of social media. And I want to make the point that at the people level, there's a deep understanding of Venezuela's journey, because in so many ways it parallels our own people's journey. I'll give you an anecdote. During the tenure of the ambassador before Martha, Alvaro Sanchez, I remember one of these Sunday VOB calling programs. So it was the Venezuelan ambassador and it was the political attaché from the United States. And they were discussing, the discussion was, you know, Venezuela, US, and all the business about the socialism, the alleged human rights abuses, the sanctions. Every single Barbadian caller that called in on that program knew instinctively, look, it is all about the oil. You all want to come and take the people oil. The Maduro, that government is using the resources of the oil to help lift up poor people in Venezuela. Every single Barbadian caller understood that and expressed that. And I often tell people, you know, you go to these Latin American countries, you see these barrios, these favelas, poor people living on mountain slopes, no access to electricity, water, no access to, you know, health facilities and school facilities, and you have an elite that sees nothing wrong with that. It took a Chavez to come and to finally say, no, you know, these are human beings. We cannot allow our petroleum resources to simply be exploited by multinational corporations. We have to use these resources to lift up our poor people. Well, we know that instinctively in places like Barbados. We know that it was only when, we know that we used to be the slums of the empire, ruled by a white merchant planter oligarchy and the colonial authorities. And it was only when black people finally, we were able to establish trade unions and political parties. We brought in universal adult suffrage, and finally we were able to get our hands on the reins of state power and use that power to lift up our people. So our people have a deep-rooted folk-based understanding of that, you know. And no social media titillation or misrepresentation can erase that. And so instinctively, our people know what the Cuban struggle is. They know what the Venezuelan struggle is. So I'm bringing all this back to say that we are building our Caribbean civilization. Yes, we are a project in process. We are not the finished project product. You know, there are a lot of we are on a journey. We are on a journey, but fundamentally, our people, just like how those British colonies in North America came together, established this United States of America. The ones in northern North America came together and established the Confederation of Canada. Two very powerful countries today. We are on a journey as well. And we have to build that Caribbean civilization. And because of our peculiar history of colonization and enslavement, and you know, that kind of oppression of the masses of our people in Venezuela and Cuba, in the CARICOM countries, it is ultimately going to be a civilization that has at its core some kind of social democratic construct based on lifting up ordinary people. And all of these relationships, the learning of Spanish, the learning of French, the development of the development of relationships with Martinique and Guadeloupe and Venezuela and Cuba, that is our future. Some people from outside can delay it, they can make it difficult, they can put obstacles in our way, but that ultimately is our overarching future.
What is your sense of the importance of, particularly in the Chavez administration and subsequently, of a dynamic that is not often talked about in Latin America? And I'm talking about, speaking to you as a Pan-Africanist, about the relationship of the state to the black peoples in the country. Unlike much of Latin America, Hugo Chavez made a specific point of embracing the African part of Venezuela. It's not a small part, a part that has been marginalized through many white ring administration regimes. But under Chavez, you saw an embracing of the blackness of Venezuela, and that's not a negative blackness of black people in Venezuela. And I want you to talk a bit about the significance of that, particularly as it relates now, or it's expressed in terms of the country's external relations with predominantly black countries here in the Caribbean.
Well, you remember I said that when Chavez came with PetroCaribe, the traditional white oligarchical elitist forces in Venezuela took him to task for how could you be squandering Venezuela's resources on these undeserving black people from the Caribbean. That was basically what they were saying. And the revolution of Chavismo, the core of it is really, yes, those formerly submerged black and brown masses. You go to Caracas, and see the members of the civil militias, right? These are like the civil, semi-organized groups that I guess help with security and so forth. Black and brown people. Black and brown people, and Chavez distinguished himself by identifying personally with his African and his indigenous ancestry. That is what made Chavez so unique. And so the Chavez revolution really is, as I said, it's a revolution that our people instinctively understand, because it was basically the same road we trod. That there came a time when organized forces from down below were able to get their hands on state power and finally begin to use the resources of the country to lift up the people at the bottom. And that is why those people at the bottom, which were fundamentally, indigenous, black and brown people, have been the bulwark of that socialist regime.
But is it not significant that both Venezuela and Cuba, that have taken those very specific stances, are two countries now in great peril as a result of the exercise of power by the United States of America?
Yes.
Is that accidental? Is it coincidental? Is it part of a plan? You spoke about the national strategy, which actually is a manifestation of something that goes back to 1823 of the Monroe Doctrine.
Yeah. Yes, and from way back then, the United States has set its eyes on Cuba. They always wanted Cuba from the 1820s. They said Cuba should be part of the national territory of the United States. Of course, back then, Cuba seemed extremely valuable because in terms of its geographical location, it was the key to the Gulf of Mexico. It was strategically located in relation to all of the major shipping routes, and so the United States set their eyes on Cuba from back then. So they've always wanted it because of this large Caribbean island with this strategic location. But when and they made it into a virtual colony in 1898. You remember with the Spanish-American War when they invaded, and they virtually made it into a protectorate or semi-colony of the U.S. And it was Fidel Castro and his revolution that really liberated Cuba from that semi-colonial status and made it into this paragon of sovereignty and independence. And so ever since then, that Cuba was seen by the United States as a bad example, because it was a very outstanding and important example that the Monroe Doctrine could be defied, that a country in this Western Hemisphere could stand apart and have its sovereignty and its independence. And so, and similarly, when Chavez came with that revolution at the turn of this century, in the eyes of the United States, that too was setting a similarly bad example, a bad example to the other countries of Latin America and the Caribbean. Now, we in our own way, we have trod a similar path, but we are much smaller. We don't carry the same size and therefore the same significance of a Cuba or a Venezuela. Although we have done very similar things. We are not communists. Sometimes we haven't even called it socialist. Sometimes we say, we might have said democratic socialist, we might have said social democracy, but fundamentally we have followed a path of lifting up the people at the bottom.
So you're saying that the only reason that we've escaped the ire of the United States is because we don't matter that much?
Because
strategically?
we are not, because of our size, and I guess, the Cubans, the Fidel came to power through an armed revolution. That made a difference as well. Venezuela, Chavez came to power in a country that U.S. oil interests had totally dominated, for decades. So those examples were extremely stark, and therefore attracted the attention of the U.S., who felt that this was dangerous, and this had to be counteracted. I am suggesting that we, in our political and social policies, have followed a similar people developmental path. I mean, Barbados, we have the free education, the free health care, the national drug service, etc., etc. But I would not put us in the same, we will not attract the same attention. Now, Jamaica, for a period of time under Michael Manley, did attract that attention. At the same time, whatever Michael Manley was doing in Jamaica, Errol Barrow was doing the same thing in Barbados. The same thing. But Jamaica attracted the attention. So to some extent, you could argue that we have been spared the fate of Venezuela and of Cuba, I guess because we have not been,
Right.
so noticeable.
Let me bring in Burton Sankeralli at this point, because the flip side to that coin is, as Professor Justin Robinson of the University of the West Indies recently stated, and now has become a very famous headline of an article. I hope you read the article if you get the chance, and not just share the headline. No one is coming to save us, and therefore it speaks to the issue of self-reliance and interdependence that we started to talk about earlier today, Burton. But I want you to weigh in on that. Yes, we don't matter that much. Question might not be the same for Trinidad and Tobago, but we, other smaller Caribbean countries, might not matter that much strategically to Washington. But conversely, no one is coming to save us from our issues, from our social and economic crises of varying proportions. So to what extent do we use the Venezuelan question as a way, a frame of analysis of our own problems? I won't put any more further words in your mouth. You weigh in here.
Yeah, you hearing me?
Yes.
Yes. Well, I don't know what matters or doesn't matter. As I recall, with Grenada, America was quite afraid of a socialist revolution that spoke English, and we speak English. If you don't speak English, Americans may barely even consider you white if you're not from Europe or some kind of thing. I mean, the whole xenophobia of the place, So we do matter. And certainly Trinidad matters. The Americans are building a little city by us that they're calling an embassy. All right. It is clear that we are a central role for American geopolitical interests there for a lot of the rest of this century if the Americans have their way, right? My sense is they can't really tell what's going to be happening in Venezuela, and they're really digging in here. It's a very perilous situation to be in, One positive thing to talk about language. Trinidad, one can say, is becoming bilingual. And think of the benefits of speaking another language. We can break away from being satellites of the metropole. We have access to a whole new world in economics and trade and music and everything, And this is happening, and it's something I think we should stimulate. The Bolivarian Revolution is committed to a vision that goes beyond the status of the nation state that has tied us down in these kind of territorial fields. I mean, the vision of Bolivar was of a hemispheric nation, a hemispheric country. And Chavez was seriously trying to implement that, to reconfigure the international order. It was a very bold experiment. In one extent, it was a little ahead of its time, but once we continue to make that commitment, things can follow from that. We have to decide whether we are locating ourselves as part of a liberation process or whether we are going to submit to this Monroe doctrine. Let me also say on language, Venezuela was a while ago, as far as I know, they are still pursuing it, but they were stimulating research into Creole, into the Creole language, which was spoken in parts of Venezuela because of migrants from our part of the Caribbean, like Trinidad and Grenada. And the Creole language is an African-based language, so we have a model, we have a movement we can join in if we have the political will to do so,
Does it always have to be about political will? I thought we had agreed that the people have to step up and start to form their own power structures.
Well, politics comes from the people, and we must not let the powers take that first, It's our will. It's how we organize ourselves, how we are prepared to organize ourselves politically, right? That's the kind of talk that may frighten those who have who wield the structural power. But the people and those who are willing to take that step must start taking that step,
Well, if Sunity Maharaj were here, I could hear her being forced to invoke her husband's name in his declaration that we do not have politics in the Caribbean. What we have is government in the Caribbean. How can we sort of remove that from being the locus of discussion in how in power, that it is all about what the government does and how the government operates and not how people relate to themselves. And just to add to that, Ambassador Comissiong has made the point, it is people who have deepened CARICOM integration well beyond what any governments have been able to achieve by simply meeting, talking, living with each other, marrying each other, and so on. And that, to that extent, that is going to be part of the solution to this problem.
Yes, I think that is key, and that is one of the, how do we put this, possible advantages of periods of crisis and structural change. The people may lose faith in the government, which I think is a good thing.
You do? Well, let me just...
Yeah.
Well, here, a representative of a government is about to jump in, but you develop the point completely, because I think I understand what you're saying, but for anybody who's just walked out of a cave and wondered, wait, Burton Sankeralli says dismissal of government is a good thing, that would be important to stress.
Well, by dismissal, I mean it has to be something where we bring things to the table. It should not be an indifference. It should not be an ignoring. But we have to bring self and presence to the table.
I get you.
I just want to, I know we have to wind up now, so I just want to make 2 points. One, I want to make the point that, look, as progressive as Chavez is, Alba, as UNICER, none of them are as deep an integration process as CARICOM. All right? So bear that in mind. So when I am saying that we in this Caribbean community, that we have walked a similar road, don't dismiss me casually. What we have done with CARICOM is a deeper level of integration than ALBA, okay? As progressive as ALBA was. The point I would like to make to Brother Burton is that we need our people to step up. It's a symbiotic relationship between the people and the governments. I am saying that the stronger the people become in their consciousness, in their activism, in their public demands, it strengthens the government. It doesn't, a strong people, a strong, active, assertive people does not take away from the government. Any government that does not understand this, it is not in your interest to have some kind of uninformed, dumb, repressed people. It is in fact in your interest to have an enlightened, mobilized people, because it will make your work easier. It will strengthen your hand as a government. And I'm agreeing, we are in a very sensitive geopolitical moment where this thing can go in any way. We have these forces seemingly intent on pulling down the whole system of multilateralism, international law, resurrecting Monroe Doctrine, doing away with any concept of zone of peace, any concept of friends of all, satellites of none, imposing some kind of Cold War logic on our community. And we have to find a way to hold the line. And to the extent that our people, can come to the party and can be assertive, it will be extremely beneficial.
And last comment, to what extent can that unanimity rule not be problematic? 1 from 15 leads not this time.
We have to, this is something that CARICOM is going to have to grapple with. We have already started to grapple with it when we did the protocol on enhanced cooperation, which was the protocol that allowed the 4 countries, Barbados, Belize, St. Vincent, and Dominica, to move ahead with the full free movement. Before that protocol, it would have been impossible. Everybody would have had to be going at once, or nobody could have gone. But we passed this protocol of enhanced cooperation that in certain aspects of our operations, we don't need everybody, 3 or 4 can make a start, and then the others can join. So I think that same kind of thinking we are going to have to apply to the major decisions that are still governed by the principle of unanimity. And we are going to have to work out some kind of structure where within certain parameters we can agree to disagree.
And it's possible to have
two
competing ideas in your head at the
well,
same
at
time?
least it is possible to allow a significant majority of member states to be able to take certain positions and not have the entire organization stymied simply because one member state, is not on board. It's going to call for some wisdom, Julius, but I think it's something that we're going to have to grapple with and find a solution to, because it can't be that CARICOM cannot even make a declaration, a statement on foreign policy, on some critical international issue, simply because you can't get one member state on board. So it may be that you can't put out the statement saying it is, the entire Caribbean community, but surely we must be able to find a formula that still permits, a majority of the member states to be able to act in that way.
Because the silence, particularly on the boat strikes, has been, for many people, quite deafening, to say the very least. All right, thank you very much, Ambassador. I'm leaving it there for now, as I gather we have to wrap. Last word from you, Burton Sankeralli, as a theologian, as a philosopher, as a Caribbean thinker. Where are we in this time of flux, and what should be the very first step that we as a people need to take to get out of this particular morass that has blown up out of the issue with Venezuela and CARICOM?
Hearing me, right?
Yes, go ahead.
Well, it's a time of contradictions. I dare say the situation is excellent. Possibilities are showing themselves. The question is, are we up to the challenge? I think there is, I dare say, a new generation moving in. There are new things happening on the ground with our people. The world is in a state of flux. So we have no choice. We will have to step up. And I believe we are I believe we are equal to the challenge. Yes.
So you're optimistic, as any good philosopher would be at this time.
The French existentialist Gabriela said there's a difference between optimism and hope. An optimist, Marcel says, is a speech maker. Things will get better. Things may actually get worse. But when you understand theology and what hope means, it means that no matter how bad things get, possibilities are there. And it's up to us to meet it.
All right. Well, on that very, very hopeful and optimistic note, we must end our discussion on Venezuela in Focus. I want to thank Burton Sankeralli of Trinidad and Tobago, Ambassador David Comissiong, and before Senora Ortega, and I suppose the last word. Well, yeah, I'm very sorry. I thought we were running out of time, but we have enough time for a comment then from those of us assembled here, and then we can wrap. And if there are any other questions before our guests depart, please, by all means, join us. And my apologies for racing to the end, but
yeah.
There we are.
Yes, thank you very much, Derek, for giving me the opportunity. I didn't want to make a question. I wanted to make a comment, and it has to do with the position that the people should come on board, that the people should be activists. You see the anecdote that David gave with every Barbadian calling in and saying that they understand that what was happening with Chavez and that USA person, that it was about oil. There isn't a single Barbadian that I have spoken to, and I mean enough Barbadians, there isn't a single one that is not clear that what the United States is doing is wrong and that we need to do something about it. So if the governments are waiting for the people to come and activate, and the people are there, the people were there long time from the beginning, from the time they shot the first boat out of the water, the people of the Caribbean were there and being active. Why is it that the government is saying no through yourself? And it really is a rhetorical question, that you want us to talk so you could have permission to move. We've moved. The governments have not caught up with the people. And one last thing is this. While a lot of people in the Caribbean and in the world have been very critical of the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, I've been critical over some of the statements that she's made. You know what occurred to me thinking about this situation? That Trinidad and Tobago was the first casualty in this current USA aggression in the Caribbean. They were the first casualty. So it's not surprising to me that the actions of the Prime Minister. And I believe that people need to stop thinking that Kamala Prasad versus Sassar, this is the problem in Trinidad. Trinidad is governed by a parliament. Where is the parliament? And I mean both the other ministers of her cabinet as well as the opposition. So those are just two things that I want to suggest. That we need to give the ladies some space. Trinidad was the first casualty of this aggression, this current aggression of the United States. And it's difficult to see that instead of coming to the aid of Trinidad and Tobago, we have degenerated into cannibalism. Again,
a strong statement, but the counter question would be, to what extent did Trinidad and Tobago not facilitate those incursions in Venezuela? That is the other question. The United States did approach this country. The United States did approach Grenada, seeking assistance in making those original incursions to snatch Nicolas Maduro, and were resisted by those countries. So is it a question of being a casualty, or some might legitimately ask, being complicit in your own misfortune?
I believe that you have, again, redirected the question into the people are the problem. That's what you've done with that question.
Have I?
Yes, I think so. I think so. I think you have.
And
Trinidad is no less small than Cuba. Trinidad is no less small than Barbados in terms of the United States firepower. It is no less small. The people of Trinidad and Tobago are not eager to go out there and start firing guns and pelting big rocks at the United States of America. So it is easy to see how they would be, as you call it, complicit. People said that about the enslaved who lived inside of the plantation houses and worked, that they were house slaves. You know what I mean? The worst thing that you can do is begin to separate levels of oppression. The level of oppression that causes Trinidad to behave in the way that it did is the same level of oppression that exists for Barbados. Why is Barbados seeking a bilateral agreement with Venezuela instead of standing on the mountain tops and keeping bare noise about having our Caribbean? Why is Barbados doing that? Diplomacy is necessary, and we are seeing the need for diplomacy disappearing with the actions of the President of the United States. We are seeing that need disappearing. It exists. We harm ourselves on our ability to be able to act if we do not defend each other. If we start calling one another house slaves and field slaves, we harm ourselves if we do that.
Right. Or just a point of factual clarification, there's no declaration of anybody being a house slave on this podium. But if you want to respond to anything that was raised, the question about whether, about the people and so on, what's your response?
The one statement that I heard there that I would agree with is that, yes, the Caribbean people are very clear on this issue of the blowing up of the boats. I heard this, for example, on the ground in St. Kitts, when I went to St. Kitts for the last Heads of Government conference, just speaking to people on the ground, ordinary citizens, and they were incensed that our governments had not taken a stronger stand on this issue. So I'm clear about that, but my point still is that it is a general point. It is a general point that the stronger the activism, the engagement, the voice of a people is, it strengthens the hand of the government. But I do agree that the Caribbean people do have the right analysis. But I would encourage our people, like the people in Grenada who mobilized and made their views heard very strongly. I would encourage more of that. In terms of the CARICOM in general, there's been no cannibalism within CARICOM. CARICOM is a structure of brotherly solidarity and support, you know? And there's been no attack on CARICOM on any particular member state. There are a couple of issues that have arisen, and I think the CARICOM leadership will try within their own councils to resolve them as best as they can. I will leave it at that. I'll leave it at that.
You don't think that there's any concern on their part of drawing attention to the occupant of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C., who will then get, in his very often unpredictable tweets that have the firepower of the most powerful nation on earth, to cause difficulties for this part of the world?
Yeah, I think there's a general apprehension, there's a general sense of weariness because of the recent unpredictability of the actions of the United States and the extremity of the actions. And the point is that when you're faced with that kind of situation, our understanding within CARICOM always was that the best way to respond to that kind of situation is with unity. However, we are now in a situation where there are there are one or two CARICOM members who, in terms of positions that they have taken up, I mean, there's a member state that says we do not sign up to the CARICOM principle of our region being a zone of peace, for example, and said that very, very openly. So in recent times, it has been difficult to get that unity. So here what I'm saying. I'm saying the best and the preferred and the optimum way to deal with the situation that we are confronted with now is one of a unified response. I mean, on so many issues, whether it is on the attack on the citizenship by investment, whether it's the attack on the Cuban medical cooperation, whether it is the insistence that some states host military facilities and so forth, the best approach really is and was always that we respond collectively as a unified body.
Right.
The blowing up of the vessels. Prime Minister Motley said it was extrajudicial killing. She said that. She came out, and the Foreign Minister Kerry Simmons as well. But you have not had. And anyhow, the point is, let me get back to the fundamental point that our lack of unity in recent times has made it difficult. And that is something that we're going to have to find a way to rectify.
Doesn't preclude a member state from speaking on its own behalf, on behalf of its own people, and making a statement on principle.
Correct. No. I mean, that is our culture in the Caribbean. You have the freedom. You have the freedom of speech. It's just that, generally speaking, we have shared a kind of spectrum of principles and positions that has made it possible. We were never identical in our positions, but we were never so far apart that with some compromise we could still get a common position. That's typically how a lot of CARICOM decisions are made. You have to compromise, but because nobody was outside of the ballpark, we were still able to get that common position. Now there's some positions that are so removed from the centrality of CARICOM that it is making it difficult.
But the zone of peace is not a last week Thursday concept. It is actually 40 years old.
Yeah, since at the very least 1979, and we could even argue we could even take it right back to the actual that decision to recognize Cuba in 1972. And the Errol motto of friends of all, satellites of none. That is a principle that CARICOM has essentially taken on board as well. We don't always, sometimes we fall away from it, but the principle, the idea of it, friends of all, satellites of none, and that is why Barbados has such wonderful bilateral relations with the People's Republic of China. A tremendously constructive relationship. Somebody wants to tell us that we must be subject to a Cold War logic that says you have to choose a side. And you have to choose our side, and there must be no place for the People's Republic of China. They should not be in Barbados building the National Stadium or helping to restructure the roads in the Scotland district, or having a medical team at our Queen Elizabeth Hospital, or helping us with the Food and Agricultural Institute in St. Lucie, or helping the University of the West Indies with the Agricultural Research Park in St. Thomas. I mean, that is the level of the engagement Barbados currently has with the People's Republic of China. Another nation wants to tell you that you should not have those relations with that country, relations that are so important and helpful to us, So yes, we have to try to hold on to our fundamental principles that have served us well, and unfortunately, we have to do it in a situation where we don't have the unity that at our best we tend to have. And that is an issue that we are going to have to address and in the immediate period ahead, and find a way to correct that.
You don't think it fundamentally threatens the future of the bloc?
No. CARICOM is too deeply rooted. CARICOM is not just these prime ministers. I mean, CARICOM is the 17 institutions of CARICOM. It's the Caribbean Development Bank. It's the Carifta Games. It's CARIFESTA that we had in Barbados. It's the University of the West Indies. It's the associate institutions. It's the Caucus of High Commissioners in London and in Ontario and in Washington. And, CARICOM is multi-layered. It is deeply rooted, and it really responds. I am making this point about our people having a folk base, a deeply rooted folk based understanding that sometimes we could kind of gloss over, but it is there. And I'm saying that fundamentally our people understand that we are building this Caribbean civilization.
I don't want to drag it out too much, but that folk-based solution, to what extent can it, however, not be structured in such a way to make it work more actively? You can give examples of the 4 countries coming together, and the right of a Barbadian to go to Belize, of a Belizean to come to Barbados or to Dominica and so on. That is one aspect of it. How else can we bring people together?
But that's always been the key issue, If you Rex Nettleford, Lloyd Bess, all our best and brightest thinkers have always made that point, that there is a storehouse, that we have a storehouse of wisdom and experience and insight based on our people, and that our tragedy is that we have never been able to best make the connection between that storehouse of wisdom and experience and our official institutions, yes, there's much more that could be done. It's basically about better rooting CARICOM and the CARICOM institutions in our people, and as I said, there's no silver bullet. I mean, I like to think of us as a work in progress. We are not the finished product. Yes, and the more that we hold on to that notion that it is all about the people, it has to be rooted in the people. The people must be at the center of it. If we follow that principle, we will get it right.
All right, thank you very much. If there are no other questions, I would want to encourage you to look at the landmark address of the 3rd of July, 1986, by one of the founding prime ministers of Barbados, founding members of CARICOM, the Prime Minister of Barbados, Barrow, who specifically declared that the Caribbean must be recognized and respected as a zone of peace. And he also, in that speech, spoke to the collective wisdom of Caribbean people and the value that has over and above the power of individual member states. So it is recommended reading, and you must, I would urge you, for your deeper understanding of where we are, understand where we were, or have been. 3rd of July, 1986, the speech at Georgetown, Guyana. And that is where we will leave it on this National Heroes Day, 2026. My thanks to the panelists and for your patient attention. And I want to urge you to continue the discussion among the people, with yourselves, and to take this discussion beyond just the confines of the Old Spirit Bomb where we've been gathered today. Many thanks to you and good evening.